Councilman Greg DeWitt, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
It would be an honor, Mayor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba,
Here.
Councilman DeWitt,
Here.
Councilwoman Carr,
Here.
Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman Gibson,
Present.
Councilman Forbes.
Present.
Okay. You have 4 heres and 2 presents. I think we're good. Derek, you want to tee us up here, my friend, or?
Yes, we have a number of quasi-judicial hearings this afternoon. What I would like to do, since we have so many of them, is do one mass swearing in of all witnesses, and then as each witness comes up, you can just indicate if you've been sworn. If you intend to testify today, or even just to speak in the public comments, I recommend you please stand, raise your right hand.
And not to micromanage, but even if you think possibly you might want to speak but aren't sure, stand up. And yeah, so honestly, that just makes it easier. Thank you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. All right, thank you very much.
Doesn't commit you to speaking, but it's just easier to do it now, so thank you.
And Council, I know that there's a number of these items that are local organizations, charities and stuff. If you've had any communications that haven't filled out the ex parte forms and you want to disclose those communications now would be the appropriate time.
Fred, do you have one?
I have 2. Talked to Derek Rooney just about issues about the case, and talked to Mark Sewin twice yesterday that I recall about concerns that he had and the Y has on the case.
In which case is that?
And I'll file a form.
Councilman Forbes, which case was that?
Pardon?
Which case was that? Which case?
The
this
YMCA.
YMCA.
Okay.
I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, first case.
Someone
Anybody else, Mike?
Well, and at being the liaison to their board, I've been in meetings when they've talked about concerns, so.
Okay. All right, with all that,
I'm racking my brain. I don't think so. I honestly don't. I don't think Vince and I have talked about anything that would, but I'm just trying to I don't think so. Laura? Or,
I've driven by.
you've driven by? All right, fill out the form. Greg?
I've seen the sign.
Yeah, right. I've heard of the YMCA.
I used to belong to the.
Yeah, right.
you guys want to be here all day?
No, but we're just, look, this is important. If there's been a discussion, you need to report it. Okay.
All right.
Darren.
So first hearing is a public hearing, on the zoning ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, approving application PD 19-60497.
Derek, I'm sorry. Do we need the stenographer?
It's not my stenographer.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Dash
Sorry.
BOS, she missed all this then. Requesting to amend ordinance 01-12 and the master concept plan for the existing Bonita Springs YMCA community facilities plan development to allow a daycare center located on approximately plus or minus 20 acres on or at 27200 Kent Road, Stratton number 31-47-26-B1-00002.0030 and providing for effective date.
Okay. Any verbal typos on the zeros and dashes?
No.
Just
no.
checking. Come on forward, sir.
We're just having fun.
Welcome.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Tom Barber from Magnolia Barber and Brundage. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor and council members. So, full disclosure, I'm a board member of the Bonita YMCA as well as representing them as a planning director at Magnolia Barber and Brundage. So, I have a long history at the YMCA. I'm excited to be here today to present this project to you.
Your show.
All right. Okay, so I think we all know where the YMCA is. In case we don't, it's east of I-75. It's bounded by East Terry, Kent Road, and I-75. So the Bonita YMCA was opened originally in 2005. The community of Bonita Springs raised money, opened the YMCA, and then through kind of a downturn in 2011, unfortunately had to close the Y. The Naples YMCA closed the Y. And then South County YMCA, which is now Sky Family YMCA, reopened it in 2012. And it's been a success story ever since. So just a quick run through of what the YMCA does. You know, they teach water safety programs for 140 children per year, roughly. 300 kids are in summer camp every year. 225 in after school, and of course, a scholarship membership rates across the board. You know, this is just more graphics about everything the YMCA does. They have an after-school care program. They bus students from elementary and middle schools from around the area. They teach water safety, and they have a sports program with 375 kids annually. And you know, an important part of this slide is it shows that with $1,700 you can support a child with an after-school program for the whole year. So just an idea of how valuable each donation dollar is there. And I did mention South County YMCA, which is Sky Family YMCA. Now they serve Glades, Hendry, Sarasota, and Lee County. And they have a proven template.
Charlotte?
Yes, Charlotte.
Checking. All right.
They have a proven template for these preschools. They have 3 open right now. One in Charlotte Harbor, a PGT preschool that they run for a commercial business, and a Venice preschool. And they're all very successful preschools. So what we're proposing on this site is a 10,800 square foot facility between infants and 5-year-olds. 128 students, and then room for 30 after school care kids as well. It'll be a 12 classroom facility. Just the existing zoning around it right now, to the north is a RM2, to the east is Ag 2, which is Pine Lake Preserve. South is Lakes of San Souci, which is RS3, and to the west is single family homes. So here's what the site layout looks like right now. The logo of the Y is the current facility. You can see the 8 pickleball courts that were just recently constructed. And then under the Y Sunshine logo is the new preschool. And then over to the right are the city soccer fields. So I apologize if I'm being quick, but I know that you guys
No.
been here all
Please.
morning, so I'm going to move through it fast.
Just didn't want Derek, who's a Charlotte County resident, feeling discriminated.
So some considerations for the specific site layout that we've laid out is to buffer existing property owners. The Lakes of San Souci are important residents to our south. Separate this facility from the YMCA itself. So we wanted to make sure pedestrian traffic moving from the preschool to their vehicles was kind of separate from the YMCA itself. And then also the privacy of classrooms. So kind of setting those apart and having a private view out of the windows of all those classrooms. And here's a look again at that site layout. So the existing parking lot that is there now will be removed, and the school was proposed to be put over it. So there's actually not any additional impervious area that's proposed with this project. We will be adding parking to the north, which is currently a lime rock parking area. I'll get into that later, but as far as the stormwater permit, there's no additional impervious for this project, and there's no environmental impacts. So here's an image of Lakes of San Souci over to the left and the proposed preschool, just showing the cross section, all the buffering that'll be in place. This is the closest residence to the property, and it was important to consider, you know, the needs of the community as well. Here's kind of an aerial, so you can see that kind of triangular portion of the parking lot, and that's where the school will sit. And then some photos that show what the views look like there now, and there'll be some additional buffering in that area as well. So as far as the PUD is concerned, this is an existing use that's allowed there. The building area is already allowed. There's enough space in the PUD to allow for that. Really, the only change that we're proposing today is to add this to the master plan and show that on the master plan. So here's what the existing PUD looks like. And this is just kind of a quick overlay that I did of the aerial and the existing site with the PUD. And you can see in blue here are the building footprints that were allowed per the PUD, which total 96,000 square feet roughly. And then in yellow is the facility that's been built to date, including the city soccer field facility. And that totals 25,000 square feet. So then in orange is the proposed preschool, which is 10,000 square feet. So that would total 36,000 square feet, which is 60,000 short of what's allowed per the PUD. So here's what the proposed master concept plan looks like. Really, the only addition is that adding that school. We also added 4 pickleball courts to this map. We may want those in the future, so we put them in now just to reserve that space. And then cleaning up some things that were constructed that were a little bit different than what were shown in the original master plan. Here's a zoomed in version. And this is just highlighting the use of daycare center facility as an ancillary use to the YMCA is already part of the allowable uses. And this highlights the square footage that is allowed per the PUD, which is roughly 15 developable acres. So that would equate to 10,000 square feet per acre, or 150,000 square feet. And again, we're only proposing a total of 36,000 with the addition of this project. So with that, I wanted to turn it over to Robert Connor with Hall Darling Architects. He was just going to talk about the architectural site plan a little bit and go through that.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
My name is Robert Connor. I work for Hall Darling Design Studio in Sarasota. And this, as Tom mentioned, the YMCA has several daycare facilities, and we have worked on the 2 previous ones that he'd mentioned. And we kind of have a prototype that we've liked to work with, and it's mostly around student safety. Normally this kind of hallway, this overall building shape is just a long rectangle with a hallway in the center, the double loaded corridor with one point of access to control everyone who's coming in and out. The site had some constraints, and so that long rectangle ended up folding onto itself. But what it gave us was the opportunity to create an internal courtyard. It gives that blue area is the playground, kind of centralized over there. And there's a roof that continues over the whole playground, connects to the 2 ends. Here in Florida, sun is always a problem on the playgrounds. The metal's getting too hot. And so really we wanted to try to create a nice space for the kids. And then, as he said also, we wanted it separate from the main YMCA facility just so the staff knows that the people there are meant to be there for that specific purpose. And the overall layout, there's kind of these 2 blocks. There's the 2 wings. We have an infant and toddler wing to the left, the smaller box up on the left. And then this kind of bent shape on the right is the 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5-year-olds classrooms. The aftercare classroom that we talked about, that he mentioned, is up in the top right there. And that lobby is that small space that connects the 2 forms, is the central access point for that. And from the front, the overall aesthetic was designed to be a simple building. We have infants coming, toddlers coming to a place, keeping it at a residential height and scale allows kind of the students to feel safe and comfortable approaching the building. And then glass at the front lobby to allow the teachers to see who's approaching, coming, and going. Let me go back one more step. And then the glass in that lobby allows you, there's a garden in the center, just to bring in some nature into the space. That long hallway can be monotonous. So the garden in the center.
Would you mind questions during your
Oh, no, go right ahead.
Okay, so right here, you can stop. Oh,
Yep.
okay. So you can see people coming in, and I hate to bring this up in our lovely, charming little city, but are there measures if there's someone walking in, you see them carrying a gun, can you automatically lock the doors? Are they bulletproof? Are there measures to shut off?
There's access control planned for the building. The front entrance door has a receptionist or a person there at all times, and then there's a secured door behind that to allow people into either the daycare or the aftercare facility, which are separated from.
And then the doors on the end of on the next slide, the doors at the end, oh, no, the next one, I guess.
Previous one.
That one. So at the end of the corridors, like,
Those are all locked. Those are exit only. Other than
emergency exits?
forward, yeah, and then if children are coming in from the playground or not.
okay, great, thank you.
So that's the view from the parking lot, the north view of it. And then on the east view from Kent Road, you can see there's a large landscape buffer that will help block a lot of the mechanical equipment and things that are over there. Again, the view from the front. And inside that central garden space, there's the glass from the hallway on the right that is from the lobby as you come out. The whole building kind of centers around that, and then you have your large outdoor playground that's covered. And this is as you come in the lobby. You can see that garden from the lobby, but also as you circulate around the building, or inside the building. And that's it. Hand it back off to Tom. Any questions?
Anything else, council? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to introduce Mark Suen. He has a few comments to make. He's the director of our board at the Bonita YMCA, and he's been responsible for this project.
A man that needs no introduction. Welcome, Mr. Suen. How are you, sir?
Very good. As indicated, I'm the chairman of the advisory committee, and my main job is fundraising. So we raise funds for the pickleball course, along with your help. We raise funds for the scholarships. He indicated $55,000 worth of scholarships this past year. When we put the school in, I'm guessing that will probably triple the amount of scholarships we need, because it's a more costly operation, and yet people are going to come by lottery. So you put your name in by lottery. If you can't afford it, we provide scholarships in order to get you up to be able to afford it. So exactly how much will depend on what the mix of people are that think. We anticipate these will be mainly working people's kids, and we're kind of ideally located. If you're living out east, you come by, drop the kids off, come in here, work or whatever you got to do, and then go back out. In addition, what wasn't mentioned so far is that this is going to be an early learning center. So it is childcare, and particularly we're probably not going to teach 3 or 4 month olds to read, but it is designed to, by the time they get done and go into kindergarten, they are 100% fully ready. So it's not just childcare, kind of a holding pattern. It's designed to actually enhance their skills accordingly.
Baby Einstein.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but
I'm dating myself and my children, but
they're going to be exposed to a lot of things to help them be ready to move into school. The challenge we have is that as we've gone through this process, getting it into permitting, and as we've gotten all the designing, et cetera, done, what was originally estimated to be maybe $2.3 to $2.5 million, and so I went out and raised money on that basis, is now at 3. Some of that's materials, some of that's different look in terms of the internal furniture, et cetera, but it's now at $3 million. As we prepared for this, we found in terms of both regulatory things as well as suggested things, could add as much as $500,000 on top of that. So now the fundraising goal would be $3.5 million. And I have to say that is a big stretch. That's going to be a real challenge. And so we're going to propose, Tom is going to propose the things we definitely will do, the things we'd like to get some relief on. And the relief is simply because, worst case scenario, we can't raise it, then it doesn't get built. We send the money back to the folks that have given us the funds so far. Second worst is that it gets delayed a year, that it takes us longer to get the amount of funds to be able to pay for it. And we don't tend to build stuff that we can't pay for. And so that would put it back a year. Right now, if we go forward, and we're able to go forward right now, we can open up in June, July of this coming year, which means for the school year, we'll be able to fill up and provide this opportunity for those kids. So, I request that you look at this and put it in the context of the fundraising. Obviously, we're one of, and you probably get 50 of them calling on your door, of valid, legitimate nonprofits that need help to do what they need to do. And so we don't have the fundraising to ourselves, but going all the way to 3.5 is gonna be a serious challenge. And I'm concerned about that, and that's why I wanted to just have a few minutes to kind of lay out the fact that this is a real challenge, and we're looking for some help if we can get it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
So with that being said, we do have a few asks that we're making today, but I just wanted to go through some of the things that we are doing that weren't really intended to be part of this project when we started, but do make sense to be implemented in it. So that includes the sidewalk through the site. So we're proposing to add a 10-foot sidewalk through the YMCA property, the one that's shown here in red. So that would connect the city property, soccer fields, down through to Kent Road. And then a connection across Kent Road that would go to the east to Pine Lake Preserve. So some of the students or Y members or other pedestrians could go across the road safely and use Pine Lake Preserve. You know, another city ordinance is to replace the parking lot lights with LED heads. You know, so we're going to go through and replace all the parking lot lights with LED heads at our expense. Another one is to add a dumpster to the site. So right now the dumpster is shared with the city soccer fields, and this project really kind of warranted having our own dumpster. So that's another expense that we're looking at. Enhanced landscape buffers, obviously, as I spoke about, the surrounding community. It's important to kind of shield the school from the community and also the children from the passers-by as well. And then we did have some damaged trees through the closing of the Y and also through Irma. A lot of the parking lot island trees were taken down or you know, died. So there's an expense to replace all those trees that we're doing as part of this project as well. So in total, that's, you know, roughly $130,000 of kind of unintended expenses that are part of this project. So, you know, things that I would ask that you consider relief on include the extension of that 10-foot sidewalk. So there's an ordinance that requires anything that's connected to a major multimodal network to have a 10 to 12-foot multi-use trail connected to it. So that would be this portion in black that would run out all the way to East Terry and would have to be constructed on the city soccer fields property. That would include relocating about 300 feet of chain link fence. There's 3 FPL power poles that are in the way, and it's roughly 900 feet of 10-foot wide sidewalk. There is currently a 4-foot wide concrete sidewalk there now that serves the purpose. Additionally, with the ITE transportation, it was looked at as a daycare facility, but the uses of this facility are a little bit different than a typical daycare. They do bus some children. They have after-school care buses, and it was also based on a 30-mile-an-hour speed of this road. And really, people leaving that YMCA don't get up to 30 miles an hour. This is really a short distance to come up to that stop sign before you turn left onto Terry. So we would ask that the requirement of the 50-foot extended turn lane be waived, and that turns left onto Terry. And then finally, something we just got in the development order comments were to upgrade all the piping along Kent Road. So I just wanted to kind of show you how the stormwater system works. The area in blue are dry retention areas that treat the site. They then run back into this lake stormwater system, a detention lake, out of control structure, and then through kind of a meandering swale wetland area, and then through the outfall into Kent Road. So as I explained before, this project doesn't add any impervious area to the site. So really the interconnected pipes here, the need for those is not necessarily generated by this project. I'm not saying that there might not be a potential need there, but this project itself doesn't really create any different.
Well, it was underwater for Irma, but, so I think we could help.
Right, I don't doubt that. But it is in the county or the city right away, so it's just an added expense that the Y wasn't anticipating. So, you know, those 3 items total roughly $200,000. And I just appreciate any consideration that you might have in waiving those.
What will be the hours of operation?
I think 7 to 6? 7 to 6, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Council, any other questions?
Is that the only ask? Is it finished?
I was gonna say, yeah. Question time? Greg? No?
He's looking.
Oh, no, I was just asking, no, I'm
I
still
got you.
pondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thank you very
So-
much.
Mike?
Well, I don't have a question for Tom, but I guess to staff about what they're asking to be able to admit, is it something that
'Cause I
is
think
in our
it's a
realm
real
that we
need.
can do this to help them out, or?
Yeah, because I think the problem's going to be, you're going to come back next year and say, we got to expand. It's going to be really filling a need for this community, but
Well, since there haven't,
maybe they could call WCI.
just some of the issues is, this is not, you're not in a position where you're allowed to waive any requirements of your land development code. Right, now, some of the issues, that if there are conditions that are not strict requirements of land development code, or there's an issue of interpretation, there may be in a situation where there has to be a rational nexus between the request by staff and the impacts. So, Councilmember Carr, when your comments about the stormwater and then there's flooding, the thing that may, and I'd ask staff to address this, but maybe the issue might be the sidewalk that goes off-site. Maybe that might be one, if there's no utilization there, that there may be an issue of timing, or it may be an issue of there's no actual nexus for there. But the other requirements, if the requirements of code, it's not something you can wave a magic wand. And if they're not requirements that are requesting a deviation or some other formal exception from, it's not the kind of thing that you can just approve at a hearing.
But going back to the comment that was made, had this, it's not adding any impervious, so why is the drainage in the parking lot needed?
Just taking a step back, I'd be very careful about getting into some of the more technical portions of it in terms of the engineering design, only because I am not even familiar enough with to tell you exactly why they have calculated the way they have. I think that the city attorney's onto a very good point when he's talking about how we handle their improvements, though, because I believe that if you start looking at, I think at the zoning board hearing we talked about both the turn lane and the 10-foot path. If council wishes to give a certain period of time, I don't care what that time period is, that's entirely up to you, from the time that it's open until the time that that path needs to be installed, we can work with that. Additionally, if you want to look at having them open and then provide a traffic study to see if that turn lane is actually required, we can do that, because then all of a sudden it becomes a technical deviation backed up by evidence that can be supported very easily, assuming that the turn lane is not actually needed. And we can very easily go along with that as well. But those are the things I think that in terms of working our way to a resolution with them, we might want to look in that direction.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, on the, for example, a 10-foot walking or bike lane or whatever you call it that they have to build, right now, there's not that much biking traffic on Terry. So we could we could say, if the city chooses to put a 10-foot lane out there, when they would do that, then they could have to pay their share of their part that we're given a time extension to, is that?
Well, I think that what you have is a requirement to connect to an existing city facility that already exists along Terry. And that's why we're looking at the requirement. However, along your lines, if you decide to say, well, within 5 years of them opening, it needs to be constructed, or give them enough time to open and then look for construction, we can work along those lines.
Yeah.
Along that same line, while we're still on the sidewalk, the city fields have been there for how long? And why haven't we, my question is if there are fields, why haven't we widened it to 10 foot? Why are they being bored this cost? Second of all, they're opening up a daycare. I'm not seeing too many 5-year-olds riding their bike out to the daycare. So what is the rational nexus? Most of those kids, most of the reasons that this is open is for daycare, not the after school. As they've said, those two things are getting bussed in there, the after school and the before school and all that, from the middle school and the elementary school. So just because they're building a structure on there now, the nexus to do it. I mean, where was this? I know it was an accessory structure with the pickleballs. Why didn't the pickleball, you know, I see more people riding their bike out there for the pickleball courts that we partnered with them 2 years ago on, more than this. Why didn't that trip the nexus?
This goes back to your complete streets ordinance, which worked its way in between.
Oh, okay, I understand that, but, okay, if it's complete streets, and I'll use my employer, that, you know what, we went and sprinkled all our buildings because that's what it was. So if we're gonna start requiring people to be complete streets, why aren't we stepping up to the plate also? Here's a city field that I'm sure kids ride their bikes to. Why aren't we doing the 10-foot thing to and from there now?
Agreed.
Okay.
I think that there's a valid point in the fact that you don't see too many children in daycare riding their bikes to school.
So, I mean, I would say when we do it, then we'll require them to do it. Not a 5-year, not a 10-year. When we decide to do Terry Street from the, you know, from the new area out to there, then we'll do it. If we're gonna do it as a city, then sure, then we'll expect them to do it. But if that's not till 5, 6, 8, 10 years down the road before let's call it the East Terry Street gets done, why bear this night, especially when we're talking a non-for-profit and a thing where they gotta go out and solicit donations. This isn't a private company that's gonna make money off this issue.
Question.
Fred?
Isn't there crosswalks you're asking for too?
That's what they're proposing as they exit their property to go over to the preserve across the street.
But that's just gonna be a paint stripe deal,
That's what we're looking at right
not
now.
pavers or anything like that, so that's very low cost. And, yeah, I think what Councilman DeWitt, soon to be somebody, another title, has pointed out is, that's what I was trying to say. I think that if we decide to put a 10-foot walkway out there on Terry, then we need to take care of the ball field ourselves. Then they put their 10-foot walk in. And the other thing, and I've said this before, but that area out there was flooded pretty good in Irma. And if you start filling in those nice deep swales and putting culvert pipes in there, unless somebody does something differently than I've heard and puts a lot of grates on top of the culvert pipe so it can breathe, you're gonna make flooding worse, not better. It's gonna be flooded worse upstream, not downstream, upstream, so.
Councilman DeWitt, to provide a little background on what John was saying, a portion of this requirement also extends from our bike ped master plan. So when McMahon put that plan together, they did incorporate a multi-use pathway down that portion of Kent Road. The idea being to tie into that major spine network that you mentioned previously when Terry Street gets done. The idea is to provide that flexibility and that multimodal access through that full entire corridor, giving you access to the Y, to the soccer fields, to everything else down the road. The way the Y is elected to set that up, they've taken it onto their property, so they could be constructed in the right-of-way if you like, or it can go onto the property as long as it provides the same intent. There's flexibility within the code for that. So that's sort of how it evolved to where it is now.
Well, I understand that. I understand how the evolution is, but to me, it's like a bottleneck. We're gonna build this nice super highway.
pinch down
and-
something small.
And it's gonna pinch down right there.
Absolutely.
And the way I feel about it is, the city soccer fields encompasses that whole north end of it.
Correct.
If we feel that that's important to have a 10-foot thing, we should be providing it from Terry to Kent Road and around to where they enter into the soccer field on that north, I guess you'd call it the, crushed gravel parking lot where it is now, where I guess.
So I
it's
think part of that problem is being improved, correct, the crushed gravel area?
Well, yeah, but we're asking them to do that.
Well, correct, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We're asking them to bear that cost when it's our fields, our maintenance, our citizens going on it. We're looking that when Terry Street gets done, we're looking for them to do it.
Yeah,
That's the part that I get with, that I have problems with, that right now, it's fine, you're gonna build this super highway right to Terry Street, and then it's gonna go down to a 4-foot area. Let's wait till we all get on the same page, and then make them pay their proportional fair share towards that.
Can I throw out an option on?
We could put
works,
that a
but
condition of approval.
Well, that's what I mean.
There's an existing sidewalk.
Yes.
How wide is it?
4 foot.
4 feet. And the code has, I'm looking right now, the code has a minimum of 6 feet. Perhaps what we do is we ask them to provide the difference between the 4 and the 2, the minimum. And then when the city's ready to move forward, we can widen it to the full 10 on our property, and they would just a small portion of that.
Can,
I would,
can
They
we
provide
widen
the-
that
the
4-foot
difference in cost,
sidewalk?
please?
That's what, yeah, just the difference in
When
cost.
They would give us.
Because the code does,
in lieu.
yeah, the code does require off-site connections when they meet certain requirements, and it doesn't distinguish between different types of uses, but they made a good point here about the nexus of whether their new users and their new development will trigger that. So what could be done is, there's a minimum code requirement, which would be 6 feet, which is less than 10, but more than the 4, but at the same time would create the bottleneck that Councilmember DeWitt's raising. So maybe what we do is, they do nothing until we get to the point, and it's a timing issue, when we're ready to make the improvements to make it 10 feet along Terry, then they might just contribute that percentage difference. I don't know if that,
I
Is
think
it
it's
that when we
impor-
get there?
I think it's important to follow the code, you know, because it's always tempting to make these adjustments, but then we're left with things that are not conforming. And when there's a good reason for doing that, then I think we should go forward. So I like your suggestion. I also like the deferred suggestion that came out. I'm not 100% sure what would be best. Because I think it is on our not even our long-term bike and pedestrian path. We already have a big infrastructure project going, what is that, east of there? So, I mean, this is something that's very active in what we're doing. So I think either what you're suggesting, have them pay.
it would be
in lieu.
accomplished both. It would meet the code minimum requirements.
Right.
It would address the bottleneck,
Right.
and it would defer it until some time.
What would that be, do you think, or we'd have to figure out a
well, I
figure?
guess
I don't know if we would look at maybe extending the project that we have going to the east there, just bringing it to make that difference of
Because the rest of the sidewalk of the project they would have to do that anyway, or
the stuff on site they're
they would
doing.
have to do it anyway?
I think when we're talking about the issues here, we're talking about the off-site.
the off-site issues. And I guess my question to Derek, and I'm somewhat confused a little bit, are you asking them to add 2 more feet to the existing?
No,
Or,
when we do, just pay the difference, because pay the difference,
Okay,
whatever that
but-
share is.
Okay.
So
Yeah, it'd be a fee in lieu option, but
why do it twice? All those mobilization costs don't help anybody.
but that would be paid for at the time we
At the
decided.
time we decided.
We
to move
decided to
forward.
do it. That could be anywhere from 2 years to 10 years.
Well, I think if we're already doing stuff in the area, we would try to see.
Well, yeah, if we are, but I'm,
But the idea is that's why I said it defers it as well, so it's not a cost that's realized immediately.
correct, okay.
That's a good solution.
That's acceptable.
I mean, just looking at all the criteria, all the
Right.
issues, that seems to be the one that,
Is there other areas where certain things can't be changed? We understand that.
I mean, again, the applicant.
Where is there any other middle ground?
So the option would exist for the applicant to request a deviation to that section. So they could go the traditional route with that and say, listen, we request a deviation, here's justification, at council's pleasure. Does that qualify for that? Staff would give their opinion, obviously. So they could opt to go that route. Generally, that happens a little earlier on in the process, obviously, before we get to you guys, but that is still a viable option at this point in time. That can still be
let me
requested.
do it, I'll do it in English.
I was going to say, so Derek, with the thought in
So
mind,
we would do a deviation from the 10-foot to a 6-foot, and then, on the code, and then, and it would just be a fee in lieu at the time that the city moves forward with expanding that sidewalk.
I think what the mayor's question was, is there somewhere else we can?
is there anywhere
We got
else?
the sidewalk,
I'm
sidewalk's
not
fixed.
familiar with the site enough to know that.
For the extra $1 million,
No, it's not a minute.
I understand, but it's,
I have a suggestion. So, no, I think November 1st was the change in impact fees. We're slated to pay somewhere around $110,000, and that was at the 30% deduction. So with the 20% deduction, we're somewhere around $120,000. So, if we could get that November 1st
can we do that?
road impact fee.
That's another, that's another issue. We can't, he's asking for, we have an impact fee schedule that was evolving with time. You pay those impact fees when you pull the permits. We're past those deadlines. We can't go back and change it. If the stuff had been decided before, maybe, but that's another way. It's just waiving something we don't have a process for waiving.
We don't have the process to do that.
Isn't there a big BSU fee on this too?
No, I don't think.
Tap in and all that?
Um,
It's pretty big.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that costs.
Yeah, we have no say-so over.
No, but we have credits with BSU. We've used them on other stuff.
We-
I think you
That-
find
that-
out
that's-
between
that-
your
that's
meter
a-
and your tap in, it's gonna be
that's
pretty
yours.
big.
We'll talk to Benita
That's
Springs
where
Utilities
affordable
about that.
housing.
Laura,
We could delay the,
So if
the deceleration lane until you could look at it with a little study.
I hear anything there's-
So if we were to pay in lieu of widening the sidewalk on the city property, who
But
determines?
on that, I don't
that fee?
even, why don't we just, when we get to it, we just do the whole thing 10? They don't pay the difference of 2 feet.
The difference is, I mean, it's a code requirement, so there's no way to waive the code requirement. And if they're going to argue for that there's no nexus there, then they have to come to the table with something more than, you know, I just don't want to, we have a cost overrun, and so please give us relief. That
And it's
wouldn't meet
not
the
today.
standard.
It could, like I said, it could be years down the road.
I'm just looking at the conditions I've seen. The only other one I could think of is, and I think Councilman Forbes mentioned it, was the crosswalk. So there are different standards and different levels for crosswalks. It may be something that, I don't know if it's a immediate safety issue. If no one's using the crosswalk, maybe that's something that doesn't get done, or it
They
gets,
didn't even add that in their
No, it's
Yeah.
minimal.
expense
Isn't it
over.
just paint on the,
They're gonna have very little
no, yeah.
pedestrian traffic with this thing.
Well, yeah, and it's going.
5-year-olds.
Yeah.
not a very big ticket either.
Yeah.
There
I guess
is
my
one-
question
one
back to Derek.
suggestion I would give the Y. Instead of,
Fred, then Greg.
pardon?
Go ahead.
Instead
Sorry.
of buying parking lot lights and paying for new heads, why don't you make a deal with FPL and lease them, and you'll save a lot of money.
Okay, we'll look into that.
I mean, a lot of money.
Great. Thank you, Fred, for that. Greg?
I just had a quick question for Derek. And could you back up like 3 slides, I guess, is my question. Right, this is for, oh, you can go back to that one. First things first. I guess, Derek, I guess your comment earlier, and just so I'm getting it right in my head, the time to ask these questions should have been in a different format. It's a little hard to make those, answer these questions or waive these fees right now. Is that what I
Yeah.
got out of this somewhat? Had they come in with a deviation during the permitting or with the PUD, it could have been done easier. But right now, we're in the 11th hour, and we're trying to make
right.
something work for them and us. And right now, the only thing that you're seeing, the 2 things that I heard John say, we can, in lieu of the 120 for the sidewalk, and we can hold off on the 30,000 for lane extension if they're willing to do a traffic study at such time that it opens. The drainage itself is,
If there's no, the issue is basically if there's no need or there's no regulatory hook for any of those things, then we can have those arguments. I haven't heard anything on the drainage crossing, or not really on the drainage crossing. The lane extension may not be necessary if a traffic study indicates that it's not required.
Are traffic
And then-
studies expensive?
more than $30,000.
And they're less than $30,000. But the other part, in the big ticket items, clearly is the 10-foot sidewalk.
And we're not waiving it, but we're
But if they
deferring it
they
to a
request a
later time.
deviation and we're approve a deviation, we can bring it down to the code minimum, which is 6 feet, which is only 2 feet more than what's there. And if we are, so the Terry Street, the entire city initiative in Terry Street is not to widen that road, but to add multimodal access to increase the amount of pedestrians. So at some point, there's going to be more improvements there, so maybe just pay the
And then
difference.
that's when that happens, that's when it triggers this nexus to either pay their proportional fair share of the 2-foot, what
Correct.
the 2-foot difference is for that many linear feet that is required by them. And again, I would still say that if it goes in front of our soccer fields that we maintain and we do, that's not on them. They would have to pay their proportional fair share from the soccer field to their existing over in front of the Y.
And can, on the widening the sidewalk, can they put a 2-foot ribbon beside the existing 4-foot?
They're not asking to do
They're
that,
not
Fred.
gonna.
Oh, they're gonna
Yeah.
They're
tear
not
it
gonna
out.
execute it, they're just gonna pay their fair share down the
Oh,
road,
down the road,
down
okay.
the road.
It's a deferral in
Based on
timeframe
prices today.
and a reduced cost via fee in lieu.
Yes.
Yes.
Can we also delay when they put the landscaping in a few months so that,
Well, that was my other question. If you back up 4 more slides or 3 more slides, and this goes back to John a little bit. Go back to your landscaping, and I don't know if it's possible, John or Sean. When you talk about, go back one more. All that on the south side, I guess you'd call it, there's already a row of trees there. We're buffering a row of trees of a row of trees. Is there any way to alleviate some of that? And I know with Anchor Church, I know they came to, he happens to be ours, and he spent a couple $100,000 to put rows of trees to buffer rows of trees. And especially since we know that there is nothing going to be there right behind there because it's easement already.
So as part of the first phase of a development, which is the first phase of this, you would have to do the perimeter buffering. If they were to ask deviation from that to install it at a later date, it could be done. Like I think the picture showed.
Yeah, oh, please, yeah. No.
John, while you're trying to find that, real quick, could they do something, which is what they did over on, at the assisted living over off of Vanderbilt Beach Road? Could they get with the Lakes of San Souci and say, hey, we're going to help you maintain this area as a common corridor like they tried to do at the assisted living over on, with
It's difficult
Bermuda?
to provide a specific condition for that right now, simply because we don't have representatives from the subdivision here to agree. But we can simply state that you would, as council, direct them to work in that direction.
I'm just saying, to try and save money, I know landscape trees are expensive and
You
everything.
do have, I mean, if you look at the aerial, there are quite a few existing trees that are there.
Right.
Couple more slides.
That-
So, Councilman, too, if you take a look at it, they actually have a landscaping kind of exhibit that shows that. So you actually have abutting drainage easements there as well. So part of that is obviously maintaining those, keeping them free of enough vegetation that they convey that water accurately, clearly, safely. One of the benefits of our land development code is, again, you can use indigenous or open space areas or take existing tree credits. So I think part of what, Tom Artie's well aware of is that there's existing vegetation there that they can get credit for to meet those requirements. That will help to cut down on the cost of new trees, irrigation for those new trees, and other things as well. So I mean, that's not that difficult of a situation. I mean, there could be savings there.
Okay, I'm just looking to help
Yeah,
them
yes,
save
sir,
some
yeah.
money at the end of the day. I know that mature trees aren't cheap.
No.
No, and if you wanted to tie that to a later date when they would be installed, or reduce the size of that vegetation, that can be done as well. Either one would either defer or reduce that cost.
I just don't want to stall this project, especially since we know that, Bonita is not shrinking, it's growing, and there's workforce housing out there that is continually coming on. Habitat for Humanity is building homes out there and have built homes out there, and I think this is a great need for that area. I would hate to delay it over $500,000. Especially if it's something that we can either A, defer, or B, work with them on to help them save some different money. If there was gonna be future land behind there that was gonna be bought and sold and houses were gonna, I could understand buffering it, but, or buffering a buffer.
Are you interested in having them install trees that would probably be smaller or not of the same size that would be required for that south buffer?
I think Greg's saying, no,
No,
they don't need to
they
add
don't
any
need it. I
tree.
mean, especially if they can get with, I'm sure that the Lakes of San Souci, be more than happy to have some help in maintenance on those.
So if they were to come up with an agreement with the adjacent subdivision, that portion of the buffer on their property could be,
I think so, just like we were willing to do with the assisted living on Vanderbilt with that, but, Bermuda Isles or Bermuda Lakes or whatever didn't
Yeah,
want
but we
to.
had the opposite party present at those meetings, so I think we have, if we're going to do that, we have to be certain.
Yeah, it's gonna be one or the other, I
think
agree.
that
And
you
we
would
can't
have-
force it down there.
We can't just say.
We can't force it.
We can't absolve them of those extra
Correct.
buffering things.
I think you would
without
have to have an
agreement from the
agreement.
neighbors.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And I do think we should do all we can to follow the code. And I think some of the suggestions that Derek made are good ones, and I would be in favor of that. They will be able to save significant or defer some of their costs. They should be able to go forward with their project. So I think we could, if everybody agrees, we could just condition it along those ways and then move forward with this.
And I agree with that, and I keep saying,
Can
there again,
summarize-
and anything
summarize
else.
What we did, what we
right?
said. Can
I don't know
Derek
what to
summarize
ask
what
you
we said
specifically,
and then
right.
move to approve?
I mean, right now, the only one I've got a good handle on is a deviation from the 10-foot multi-use path for off-site improvements, and a payment of a fee in lieu for a difference between the code minimum of 6 feet and the existing 4, so a 2-foot delta, to be paid upon when the city moves forward with any multi-use path.
And then we're
at
going
that.
to do the turn lane can be deferred, and they can have a traffic study at some time in the future.
This determination to deterred until opening, until they've got their CEO and a traffic study.
And then the third one, that pending an agreement from the neighborhood, they could be absolved of the enhanced buffering. I think those are the three things.
I think so, I agree, Amy.
Okay. And anything else you're
Well,
thinking
I'm just
about?
gonna mention this because I think I should.
Careful.
Okay, go ahead. Not only is the financial concerns important, but also time. And I know there's really not a mechanism to have an early work permit. I don't know if there's anything you can do, but maybe it's a consideration in the future with similar projects like this. In the city of Bonita, you can't break ground until you have a development order. In other municipalities, you can clear land, you can get started, you can put up construction fence. And that would really help this project if that could be afforded to us. But I know there's not a mechanism to do so, and staff has worked with me and tried to help, but there's really nothing they can do. So I just thought I'd
Eric?
mention
Is there
it.
any to
There's
come up
nothing
there?
there's nothing the council can do without changing the codes either. So, I mean, we're talking about creating a permit and a process that doesn't exist in the code, and that's why.
I
it's
just
not-
wanted to mention it because I think it's worth considering in the future for others.
Understood, and point well taken.
Mr. Barber, if Mr. Barber asks for anything else, I'm going to recommend doing all our future decisions in alphabetical order.
Council, anything else, or team at the Y, or anybody? Okay. So motion to approve?
Motion to approve as specified.
Right,
Second.
with the conditions making life easier.
Yes,
Yes,
and see if there's any public comments, please.
Oh, we gotta talk.
Can I say one more?
absolutely.
So the drainage improvements that are requested along Kent Road are a public works request. Are they tied to an ordinance? Is that something that's in the code that we need to do? Or can they just say that it needs to be done, so we have to do it?
And I-
Eric or John?
I'm looking to see
What is saying?
someone from who made that request.
Fred, you think that's gonna worsen the problem?
I think that we ought to try and give them permission to at least clear if they're willing to sign a paper saying that they accept all the risk going with that.
No, but it's a Public Works is telling them they have to put these things in.
I understand, I understand that, I just talking about the other part.
Just so
Thanks,
everybody's-
Fred. John?
Just so everybody's clear that what the comments that we're talking about are on the development order application and not part of the zoning. We can go back, sounds like there's enough of a concern on the council, we can make sure, and I'm sure they are, but we'll double check, dot our i's, cross our t's to make sure that these are following all of the regulations that we're supposed to be following. If
Have to
there,
have, not nice to haves.
correct. If there is a way, another alternative for this, we can work another alternative. If this is the only path forward, then it's the only path forward. But because this is
it
not part of
their
the,
burden- should it be their burden in terms of financially? Because that area was really underwater for a long time.
everybody out there has a part to play because of that. Yes, ma'am. And so if, like I said, we'll take a look to make sure that what is being requested is what is supposed to be requested. I really feel very comfortable that it is, but without looking directly at the regulations, I don't want to guarantee anything.
Okay. And Derek, that's not something that we can put into our own stormwater management?
That, I would be very careful with that only because we're getting into the engineering chapter and away from your zoning chapter. When we start dealing with the development order, it's a different type of deviation if they want to deviate from the code than it is what we would be presenting to you today.
Gotcha.
Council, anything else?
Well, can I ask, what is the mechanism that we look further into that? Because after we're done here, then it's just staff and the Y that's left.
You can ask him.
John, if you would, whatever you find, could you email us?
Yes, yeah, let us.
Email us, and that way we'll know the answer to it.
It's a Chapter 3 deviation, technical deviation that goes through the development order process. There are certain things that are specifically processed under that, as opposed to what you would see as part of the zoning deviations that come forward to you on a regular basis. So there's different standards and different requests, so I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. So Amy, I think we're good now, unless there's other future
I think
comments.
there was a motion, a second, and then there's
Amy made a motion, and there was a
We need
second.
Public comments.
there needs to be
Yes.
public comment.
Are we done?
With the conditions, like I say, to make life easier. And now public comment. Members of the public that would like to speak on this item, please come forward. Seeing none, there's been a motion to approve in a second. Council, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba? Aye. Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Okay.
Hey, your next item is Greyhound Alley,
Keep up the great work.
residential
YMCA.
plan
Thank you.
development, a zoning ordinance of the city of Bonita Springs, Florida, approving application PD 18-50047-B07, rezoning approximately 1.85 acres from two-family conservation zoning to residential plan development at 9800 Carolina Street and 27800 Greyhound Alley. Strap numbers 34-47-25-B3-00252-0025-2A and 34-47-25-B3-00252-005D, providing for an effective date.
Don't let me get in your head on those, Rooney. Don't be thinking of me when you're rattling those off.
I'm thinking of something.
Great job. Hello, welcome.
Good morning, Mayor, or good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I'm Wayne Arnold with Grady Minor Engineering, representing Habitat for Humanity today. From Habitat, we have in the audience Rick Mercer and Jake Burbach, and they're here to answer any specific questions you might have with regard to Habitat. Mike Dellett, our professional engineer from Grady Minor, is here, who's been working on the water management design with your staff and can answer any specific questions we might have. This is a project located north of Bonita Beach Road and south of Carolina Street. It's a little under 2 acres, and it's currently zoned TFC2. We're asking for a residential plan development to allow a singular unit type, and that's two-family attached. Habitat would like to build for-sale product, obviously, and under two-family attached, you in essence have a duplex structure that each resident would own the land and the home that's on their side of the lot. I don't have an image to show you of that, but I'm sure you can imagine duplexes or other twin villas you've seen in your own communities, and that's essentially what Habitat wants to build here. The site's fairly compact and unique, and we've worked very hard with your staff to come up with a conceptual plan that meets the needs of Habitat and addresses your code. On the screen is a copy of the conceptual master plan. It's a pretty simple design that will net Habitat 7 structures equating to 14 residences here. Each of the residences would have a single-car garage as well as driveway parking. We've asked for several deviations to make this work, and we've had good cooperation from the adjoining property owners to grant a fence easement and a road easement, for instance, so to allow that to happen. And staff has worked with us very well to understand the challenges of what Habitat is trying to do in our community and work with us on some of the other deviations, which have resulted in, which we think is going to be needed 14 units in your community, but also to deal with some of the issues that you brought up on other projects for Habitat, which was making sure there's adequate parking. And in this particular case, staff was concerned about drainage. So I'm not going to go through all the details, but the area that I'm highlighting is a dedicated water management system that we've worked with staff to develop and demonstrated on the master plan. And staff was encouraging us to look at this design rather than have swales on the backside of individual lots with drainage easements. So we would have a dedicated water management tract, for instance, so it wouldn't be encumbered against the individual lots. I'm not going to go through all the deviations. I think the zoning board, dealt with this very fairly. We had one resident that spoke in favor. There was a question that was brought up about servicing this with garbage trucks and other delivery vehicles with our road design. And this has been preliminarily reviewed by the fire district, and they've said our road configuration is adequate. The one neighbor who was there, the minutes are a little unclear, but she was supporting us by saying she lives on one of the adjacent streets, and it's the same configuration, and the service vehicles have no trouble backing down to receive garbage or mail, et cetera. So I'm happy to answer questions, and we're here to answer any questions you have. I know that there's some time constraints. I don't want to overlook anything, but it's a pretty straightforward project, I think.
Council, what's your pleasure?
Motion to approve.
Hear from the staff.
Sure, absolutely. Motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second for discussion. Staff? Team?
Sure. We've worked for quite a while with them to get to where we are today. They are requesting 8 deviations. We've agreed with them with 3 of them with some slight modification. In our staff report, if you notice where the roads dead into the east and west, we've asked them to put up a fence so the headlights won't shine into the neighbors' backyards. And then on Carolina Street, we've asked that they include, as they plat this, a limited access easement so that there will never be a driveway closer along Carolina that would create a safety concern. Other than that, our standard conditions, I think they've agreed to everything we have in there. We talked about drainage problems and roof gutters and things that need to be added. So with that, with the conditions as we have listed in the staff report, we're in favor of it.
Great. Anybody else, anything to add? Questions? Motion to approve in a second? Public comment. Any member of the public that would like to speak on this, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Did we get a motion? I'm sorry.
We had a motion and a second. Yes, we did.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Don, you just sit up there.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. All right.
Hello, welcome.
Council, the next two items are a special exception and a variance, which under our code for wireless communications facility are sort of linked together. So what I'm recommending for just time efficiency purposes is as consolidating the public hearing on both issues. If the applicant is available and prepared to be able to make their presentation, address the standards for both the special exception and variance, it will make everything a lot easier, and it'll make it a little easier for the council to follow and the public to give input. Also, Mr. Spain is here from Theriac in Spain. He's been involved in the processing of this application because it is a complex matter, and staff has had some questions, so he's here if you have any questions. And with that, don't know if we have anything else, so let me just go ahead and well, I don't have to read off the resolution, so I'm happy.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Solik. I'm 121 South Orange Avenue, Suite 1500, Orlando, Florida. I am legal counsel for Vertex Development, who is the applicant on the project today. And with me today, I have Alan Ruiz, who is the principal of Vertex, Brian Holmes, a project manager with Vertex. I have Patrick Keene, who is the RF engineer for T-Mobile, who is the anchor tenant for the proposed tower, and George Brousseau, who is the RF engineer for AT&T, who will be the second user on the tower. The minutes from our P&Z hearing on the special exception and variance applications are in your packets. And if you look closely, you will see that our hearing took 2.5 hours. Ordinarily, I would have gone back to my office and said, well, that was a battle. But this was not a battle. It was a pleasure. I've been doing cell tower work all over the state of Florida for 20 years, and I have to tell you that you have the most talented, smart, professional, engaged, and invested lay board that I have ever seen. We had a 2.5-hour discussion about what was the right thing to do for your city and how to respect the code that you have so recently adopted. And your P&Z board ultimately determined that we had met our burden of proof on the special exception and variance criteria and recommended approval of our applications as submitted. You have very lengthy staff reports in your packages, lots of documentation in there. There is no real dispute as to whether our applications meet the objective performance criteria in your code. And by that I mean setbacks, zoning districts, etc. The issue really is the height of the structure and whether we have met our burden of proof on the need for the height and the location. Let me just remind you, we've requested approval for a 120-foot flagpole or stealth telecommunications tower. We need a special exception approval to go from the permitted height of 35 feet to 75 feet, and we need a variance to go from 75 feet to 120 feet. T-Mobile is slated to use the top of the tower to take the top 12-foot canister, and AT&T will take the second 12-foot canister. We have submitted RF reports from both of the engineers for these two companies. and to justify the need for the tower and the height. And both of those reports are in your agenda packages. Your staff has reviewed them and determined that we've not demonstrated our need for the tower at the height requested. The P&Z board was very interested in these reports, and I suspect that you are too. And they really wanted to talk more with the RF engineers than they wanted to talk with me. So at this point, I'm going to invite both of the RF engineers to the podium, and at your pleasure, they can either both go through both of their reports, substantiating their need, or you can ask questions. It's the pleasure of the board. I know you've had a long day, and we don't want to wear out our welcome. So at this point, I'm going to ask Patrick Keene from T-Mobile to come up first, and George Brousseau with AT&T is also available.
Great.
What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want them to go through them, or do you want to ask questions?
Council, what's your pleasure? You have any questions at this point?
Maybe just a synopsis of what.
Okay, sure. So we've you have them in your packages, but we've put them in these. So Patrick, just give a little, identify yourself first.
Good afternoon, Patrick Keene, 1368 Northwest 86th Way, Coral Springs, Florida. I have been sworn in. I'm here today as a representative for T-Mobile in support of a new tower in this location. We currently, T-Mobile has coverage deficiencies in the area. I think this is a good map just to sort of focus on. Okay. That's sort of a network layout of our system. The green dots are current facilities, the pink dot is, or magenta dot is proposed. And surrounding that pink dot, we have significant coverage problems. The signal levels are low. And because of those low signal levels, because there's no facility there, we have performance issues. The phone performs, the service is poor because the coverage is low. So we've been doing upgrades to the surrounding facilities. There's 8 facilities indicated on that map for over the last decade. And while we can measure improvements in the area in question, sort of where that blue ring is in the center, the improvements have not been sufficient to meet our requirements. And what we're saying is that the people using phones in that area are not meeting our system requirements. That people are having slow download speeds. Sometimes they're hitting the send button a couple of times, nothing's happening. Sometimes they're in the middle of a conversation and the call drops. A worst case scenario would be an E911 call would not be possible. But that's very rare that an E911 call does not go through, but it does happen sometimes. So part of the report, and the early part of the report was a very basic, but during the course of the application, I was asked by the developer to provide additional information demonstrating our need. And so this part of the report is probably a little out of scope to discuss in depth, but if you look at the upper left-hand map, that one might be important because that sort of shows network density. Where are all the people using the phones? And there's 3 areas, 1, 2, and 3 marked. There's an elementary school, an intersection with a commercial district, and then another small commercial area along US Old 41. So you notice that those areas have bright magenta and red colors. That's high usage. And if you look at the other maps going through this section of the report, like the next one's failed attempts, and if you go to the next page, it shows you what are called drop connections, or where 4G cannot be used. All the bad areas in red, the bright red colors, are in those busy areas. And so if you notice, our proposed tower, the magenta dot, is pretty much centrally located in those busy areas. And so, like I said, we've done network improvements around for the last decade, but we still have these problems, these red areas. And so a new tower really is the only solution. This map is just showing the morphology to show you, it's mostly residential.
Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, because I think you're showing that there are some weaknesses in the coverage here, but just noting the findings from the staff, I don't think their finding is that you dispute the fact that you don't have proper coverage, but the fact that the solution of 125 foot, is that what it is? 125 foot tower is not the minimum relief that could correct for your current problem. Is that the case?
That's my understanding of the staff's report, ma'am.
So, I mean, that's really what is in dispute here. Whether there could be a different way of, quote, helping you with the problem that doesn't require a 125-foot tower?
Well, in this area, the coverage gap is significant enough where we could, a tower of higher elevation would be a better solution for us.
But you could put the 70, I guess, they don't need a variance for 75 feet, is that already in the code, is that what it is?
Well, the code basically allows for a special exception up to 75 feet. The issue is that, and I'm paraphrasing what I learned from that multi-hour hearing, which is that the more antennas you can put on a single taller tower, and I think they need like 10 feet of spacing each, allows you to use a single tower to cover a greater area for multiple carriers. You could, of course, have lots of 75-foot towers all around if you could find all those locations. So there was a lot of testimony at that hearing, and I'm sure they can recap it to say why the 120 feet was required by the various carriers, and they had engineers for each one explain their various maps. And so that's sort of what I gathered. There was an explanation. I'm just paraphrasing to speed it up.
That was my understanding from listening to that interchange before. But also, I guess what the council is being asked to consider, whether the former vision, if you might say, from our current code, which is that we would prefer, or the former council prefers, a series of lower towers that are distributed through the areas because they thought that it would be aesthetically better that way?
Well, there was if I believe and this was something that was brought up by Councilmember Carr at the immediate following meeting, because she attended, which was one of the criteria, and I think it's under the variance criteria, is that if something is of such a reoccurring nature that it is likely to occur on a repeated basis, then the city council should look at amending the code so it's not constantly a hardship issue. And what has potentially happened, or at least the testimony that's in the record, was that between the time the council adopted that 75-foot model and today, the model for telecommunications rollout has changed. Previously, companies owned their own towers, and so co-location was a rare occurrence, and now companies like Veritex acquire the tower locations and then build a tower to suit multiple carriers. And so that was the concern that came out of the zoning board, which is, well, it seems likely that this code was not designed for the current market conditions. I think that, if I'm summarizing basically what occurred at the zoning board.
So we have to decide whether we go with this what we really, the process is one of determining whether we are going in favor of co-location and higher towers, or sticking with the other way, which they could still correct their problems with.
Your code already sort of encourages co-location. I think the question was, with just regard to that one criteria, is that should you also consider, absent a single application, to change the code so that you're not seeing repeatedly issues that are basically, there should be a code for that. It shouldn't just be a variance every time.
That's for the future. We could, whether we have a code change or not, we could just approve all these things, and it will effectively go to the concept of co-location and bigger towers, right? With this particular account. That's really what the issue is here, if I just read what the staff has told us.
But it wouldn't create a precedent or anything.
No.
This is a single instance.
So in the future, if we want to go, we could either keep it the way it is, and each time we consider where it is. And the one point that Councilwoman Carr had brought up was one of what happens because they're 125 feet. Can we put in a provision that they have to take it down, or do a bond, or what do they do when it's not useful anymore? Then we're left with a 125-foot tower.
When the market changes again to something else that
We're
doesn't
going
need
underground.
125.
That's the part that I think I would hope we could at least discuss, or maybe we can't do anything about it. And
Well,
we have to decide whether we're going to go in the direction of co-location.
A condition that says should the use be abandoned for some period of time, that the tower be taken down, would be reasonable. But I think part of the conversation that happened, it's in the minutes, is that the 5G rollout, which is the smaller towers, that's not addressing the same kind of communication services as the large towers. They're addressing different gaps. So it's not likely that the small towers are going to replace the big towers. And that was
Like what?
it's not likely that the small towers will replace the large towers.
But eventually they will.
Well,
That wasn't the testimony of the engineer.
Technology Advisory Board, we'd gotten a presentation. And so basically, the tall towers, the taller the tower, the better coverage area it gives because it can reach out further. So that's why you kind of want to go to the 120. And also co-locating, because of the cost of putting up these towers. If everybody had to put up their own tower, it's cost prohibitive, and they're not all going to do it. So if they co-locate them higher, they're going to get the coverage area they need at a cheaper cost to them, and we're more likely to get that better coverage in our area. Because if they have to do it on their own, they're probably not going to do it because we don't have enough residents, paying them to warrant doing many towers.
Yeah.
But with the tower, that gives the overall kind of umbrella. But then when 5G comes out, that's more of a throughput thing where you'll have more small ones all over the place, helping with bandwidth and not the actual, the overarching umbrella of the bigger towers. So I was under the same impression that 5G, the small towers, would get rid of the big ones, but they're saying no, you still need the big one, and the small ones kind of fill in all the gaps.
And counsel, I'm not trying to testify, I'm not qualified, I'm trying to reiterate things that were in the record originally, but I think, and their engineers can describe it, the 5G issue is at the frequency does not penetrate buildings well, whereas the big towers are on a different frequency. I think that does penetrate buildings and gets to other places. So I think that's the end of my testimony on the item. But.
And I'm going to let Patrick finish and answer some of the things that you've raised. But in this particular location, it's not just a co-location issue. Both of these carriers need sufficient height to fill in the deficiencies in their coverage that they're experiencing in this area. So there's two prongs to this. There's the height that each individual carrier needs, and then there is the issue of a structure that's capable of supporting more than one carrier. And right now, you have two carriers, 2 of the 4 that are licensed in your marketplace that are coming to you to say, this is an area that we are underserving. Our service is not up to our company standards, and we're willing to invest the infrastructure in your community, and this is a tower that meets both of those carriers' needs. You drop this thing down to 75, and you'll have to ask both of these guys whether either one of them could use 75 feet and whether they would make that sort of investment in your community at 75 feet. They have to justify the resources that they put. They have unlimited needs and limited resources. But I'm going to let the RF guy talk about some of the more technical issues that were raised about 5G and coverage.
I got one more question. If you can go back to your heat map, your 2 heat maps. Either or the one after this is probably better. When you talked about originally, I got 2 questions or 2 comments. One, you talked about you made major improvements on it. On this bottom right, all the blue, those are what? Drop calls and or frequencies? Your bottom right heat map.
Drop calls, so it indicates.
Okay, and that's what I'm getting at. Okay, so there's all your drop calls. Well, you've got your 8 other ones there. So have you done your due diligence on, did you make your needed improvements? Because why are you having your drop calls still in those areas already?
Oh, that's the last slide, right? Last page?
No, keep going back.
No, this is it.
No, go back to the very first page you were at was
Yeah,
right there.
that one right there, your heat map, both of those heat maps. Obviously, your top right one shows your frequency and drop calls.
All right, so
And I'm assuming these are after you've made, in your statement, you've made significant upgrades in your other 8 locations in there, but you're still having drop calls. So have you did the due diligence? Is there more you can do there?
on a sort of a micro level, yes. On a macro level, no. So, and I wanted to just refer back to the points about the tower heights. So both gentlemen spoke appropriately that the higher the tower height, the larger the footprint.
Correct.
The lower the tower, the smaller the footprint. So if we have shorter towers, we need more towers.
All right, now, well, that leads me to my next question, my next comment. This tower is going to be 125, correct? 120. Well, the 2 carriers are already going to take up 24 feet of it, so we're at 100 feet. The testimony has been that, anything less than 100 feet is not really feasible, not really marketable, not really there. So the other 2 carriers aren't going to want it. So are we going to have another another request for the other two big carriers to do this somewhere else, because from 100 to whatever, 82 feet, we're gonna get nobody, and from 82 to 75, which is to spec, we're not gonna get anybody. So I'm just saying, when the statement is made that all four carriers could share this or possibly share, that may not be a true statement, since we're looking for the greatest height out there.
You're correct. The tower
Okay.
will be constructed to physically accommodate four carriers. I don't know what the coverage footprint looks like for the other two carriers that are not at the table today. I don't know, I can't opine whether they could use this site or not. I don't know what their surrounding networks look like. You're right, I don't know what that future holds.
But you probably could opine that if the roles were flipped, the other two were on top, your AT&T and T-Mobile may not be interested in something this low.
Fred? Sorry, hang on, Fred?
Yeah, talking about what Greg's talking about, and if you don't know, Greg probably would know, because he knows what I'm talking. There's a big tower out on Tower Road in the DRGR, and it's big. It's way up several hundred feet. In fact, Verizon just put a device on it so they could boost the signal strength out to Bonita National. How far is this proposed tower location from that? Because that's a taller tower that both of them probably get space on.
I don't have addresses there. We gotta do have.
Do you know what that, it's not,
Over the second
It's on
one.
Tower Road out by Duke.
Tower Road off of Bonita Grande.
Come down as Tower Road.
I don't know.
If you look at the tables.
It's tall.
It looks like they're already on it.
So, yeah, it looks like there's a
Yeah,
1,000.
it's a guide tower, it's right here, right here. Yes, it's an it's American Tower, it's a guide tower, it's 210 feet, and, T-Mobile's already on it at a rad center of, it doesn't say what your rad center is, but, it's not that one, it's that one, they're already on it.
So you're already on that.
T-Mobile's already on it, and are you on that too, George?
I'm not sure if I'm on that one.
But Fred, your point would be,
Well, my point.
no,
is,
and I think I get it, so- but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Verizon had almost no bars out at Bonita National. They put a unit on that tower, and they went to 4 bars.
Right.
So,
But that won't solve your issue, is what you're
No.
saying.
And there's very few properties that can accommodate a 120-foot pole,
Right.
because you have to have.
Absolutely. You have setback requirements, and your setback requirements are 100% of the tower height. So for a 120-foot pole, you need a parcel that's at least 240 feet by 240 feet, which is that's an acre and a third. And there aren't that many properties, and that requires a landlord to allow you to put the tower right smack dab in the middle of the property and really affect the overall utility of the parent tract for other uses. So, yes, there's just a limited supply of properties. We think we found a perfect location. The church property is 4.3 acres in size. It has the southern portion of the church property is already encumbered with a conservation gopher tortoise preservation area that is on-site tree protection, which allows for a great amount of buffering and screening of that tower to the south and to the east. You won't even see it. And this whole community is really essentially a residential community. So it's very difficult for us to find a location in there that would meet your setback requirements and be appropriate for a location and benefit from the buffering that site provides. Okay, did we
Fred,
get,
did you have another question? No.
did we get your questions answered? Do you want Patrick to continue? Do you want George to come up here?
I think it's just, basically, everybody gets it, right?
Right, George has got, his issues are just a little bit different. He has more of a capacity
Okay.
issue.
I'm gonna have to depart in 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, so maybe we should, are we gonna have enough for a quorum and a vote and all?
Oh, do you need,
Yeah,
If I'm gonna
I
vote,
tried to pare this down as much as I could. I didn't want to
Can we
keep you.
just have a comment on whether there can be any provision for if it is abandoned at a future where they could
Uh,
do
That's a condition we will agree
bond or
to.
I
Our
don't know
lease,
what you could do, so that they would be
We
responsible.
we could have them post a surety bond that
Yep.
would remove it.
a bond, we're fine with
I would be
that.
happy with, I'm going to vote in favor of this for the thing, so I'm happy with it if we have that
I'll
condition.
make a
Make a
motion to
motion to
approve.
approve. Second.
With the condition
Yeah.
of,
Surety bond,
A surety bond for the removal
be
costs.
abandoned.
We do that routinely. It's not an issue.
and if it's abandoned,
Yeah, it
that
takes,
covers all of that. Okay.
whatever,
would that include the additional staff conditions that are in,
what are they?
or any objection to staff conditions?
No,
Yeah.
Don't forget the public comment.
Okay, so there's been a motion with the extra verbiage and conditions, and there's been a second. We're clear what the extra verbiage is?
Yes?
Okay. Public comment at this time. Members of the public that would like to speak on this issue, please come forward. Seeing none, council, any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carr?
Aye.
Mayor Simmons?
Aye.
Councilman Gibson?
Aye.
Councilman Forbes?
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt?
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your professionalism and great attitude.
They're friends.
And I want to thank staff for all the work,
Yeah.
really, hard work. Thank you.
For their professionalism
thank
and
you for
mostly good
interpreting.
attitudes.
Mike Gibson for his explanation.
Thanks, everybody. Anything else to cover, anybody?
We're good?
We are adjourned. Thank you.
I didn't even know they did two of the cases. I think